The backyard was buzzing. Kids played. Glasses clinked. Laughter danced in the air. But when Bill Clinton stepped onto that makeshift wooden stage, everything changed. He didn't quote a speech. He didn't talk policy. He sang a song no one had ever heard, about faith, fear, and what comes after the spotlight fades. By the end, no one spoke. Some wept, and none of them would ever see him the same way again. The late Arkansas evening settled gently over the Clinton family ranch, the sky painted in strokes of lavender and gold. The scent of grilled ribs mixed with magnolia in bloom, wrapping the backyard in a familiar southern warmth. Around 40 people, family, old staffers, a few neighbors, and longtime friends, had gathered for what was meant to be nothing more than a relaxed cookout. Bill Clinton, now well into his 80s, stood at the grill. Not the president, not the political strategist, just Bill, wearing faded jeans, a navy button-down rolled at the sleeves, and sneakers that had seen better decades. He manned the flames with quiet satisfaction. His hair was all silver now, his back slightly stooped, but his smile, still that slow, charming thing, hadn't aged a day. They weren't here for politics. That life was behind him. This was for connection, for remembering who they were when the cameras were off. A chance to laugh, drink, and eat too much peach cobbler. String lights swayed gently above. Children ran barefoot through the grass, squealing. A Bluetooth speaker played Otis Redding and Ray Charles. Someone, probably Chelsea, had set up a karaoke machine by a small platform in the corner of the yard. Most didn't take it seriously. A few brave souls got up and sang, terribly and joyfully. No one cared, except Bill. He kept close to the grill, politely declining every invitation to sing. "Y'all don't want to hear me croak through suspicious minds," he said with a laugh, flipping a rack of ribs. But as the sun sank lower and the crowd's energy mellowed, the requests grew more sincere. This wasn't teasing anymore. It was family, real and chosen, wanting a piece of the man they knew, but rarely saw vulnerable. "You always said authenticity matters," said Mel, his old communications aide, her eyes soft. "Let us hear yours." Clinton chuckled, but something in his gaze shifted. He looked out at the people who had stood with him when his world burned down and rebuilt again. They weren't asking for the president tonight. They were asking for Bill. He wiped his hands on a napkin, cleared his throat, and said, "I've got one song. Just one. But I didn't write it for a room. I wrote it for when I couldn't sleep." The crowd quieted. "It's not on any record," he said. "Not something you clap to. But if y'all will listen, I'll sing it." A pause. Then Mel nodded. Someone unplugged the Bluetooth speaker. The kids sat cross-legged in the grass, suddenly still. The laughter had faded, replaced by anticipation, the kind that settles in when a moment turns sacred. Clinton climbed the 2 steps to the platform. He adjusted the mic, then picked up the beat-up acoustic guitar that leaned against a chair. He looked at them all, those who knew his greatest triumphs and his deepest failures. "This is called Hollow Light," he said. "It's about believing in something, even when you don't know if it's still there." Then he played. The melody was fragile, a minor key, just 3 chords, and yet they carried the kind of ache that only comes from a long life lived in public, and a soul that had wandered through regret. When the crowds are gone and the lights go out, and the mirror don't lie like the press did, I asked the silence, "Are you still here? Or did I lose you in the noise I made?" His voice was cracked, uneven, but it was real. Faith ain't loud, not like speeches are. It's the whisper that stays when the shouting stops. People stop breathing. The pastor in the back wiped a tear. Chelsea covered her mouth. Mel was already crying. He sang not as a man who had answers, but as a man who had spent his life wondering if he'd ever deserved to ask the questions. "I made deals with doubt. I danced with pride. But I never stopped knocking on that door. By the time the song ended, the backyard was silent. He set the guitar down. His hands trembled. He smiled, small, uncertain. "Well," he said softly, "that's what I had." No applause. Not yet. Just people sitting with what they'd felt. The moment wasn't for clapping. It was for remembering that even men with monuments carry shadows they've never named. And tonight, Bill Clinton finally did. They didn't talk much that night, not right after. After Bill Clinton stepped down from a small wooden platform, the hush in the backyard held. Conversations didn't pick up. Nobody made a joke. It was as if the air itself asked everyone to stay silent a little longer, to not rush what had just happened. Bill walked back toward the grill, though the coals had long gone cold. He wasn't sure where else to go. His hands still trembled, not from performance anxiety, but from release, from the weight of having finally said something out loud that he'd carried quietly for years. He didn't look for approval, didn't need it. But when Mel approached him, tear-streaked and smiling, she simply said, "You didn't just sing. You told the truth." Others followed. No speeches, no fanfare, just hands on his shoulder, quiet thanks, and in a few cases, long, wordless hugs. Chelsea stood beside him for a while. She didn't speak, just leaned her head gently against his arm, and he rested his chin on hers. For all the years they'd spent navigating cameras and scrutiny, tonight was the first time she saw him unfiltered. The next morning, the group text thread was alive. Photos from the barbecue. One of the kids asleep under the picnic table. Another of the karaoke stage lit by string lights. But the comments all circled back to one thing. Still thinking about that song. I didn't know Bill could write like that. I keep hearing that line. Faith ain't loud, not like speeches are. And then the messages started coming from people who hadn't been there. I heard you sang something last night. People are talking about it. Was it recorded? Can I hear it? Bill didn't answer those messages. Not yet. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't written the song to be heard. It was a private prayer, born in quiet nights, long after the world had stopped listening. He never expected it to echo, but it did. 3 days later, Mel asked him to come by the small recording studio her friend ran in downtown Little Rock. No producers, no pressure, just one mic, a guitar, and one take. "I think people need this," she said, "and I think maybe you do too." He hesitated. "It's not a performance." "Good," she replied. "Then let them hear the real thing." He showed up in jeans and a windbreaker, carried the same old guitar. The sound engineer didn't introduce himself with a handshake, just a quiet nod and a respectful silence. Bill sat on a stool, adjusted the mic, and played Hollow Light one more time. The recording was raw, imperfect. The strings buzzed once. His voice cracked twice. But when the song ended, the engineer hit pause and said softly, "That was church." They didn't release the song publicly. Not on Spotify. Not through any platform. Mel suggested something simpler. Something more intimate. A few burned CDs. A few email links. Word of mouth. They sent it only to people who asked. And people asked. A retired nurse who'd struggled with faith after losing her son wrote back, "I didn't think a president could sound like that. But maybe it's not a president singing. Maybe it's just a man." A high school teacher in Texarkana played it for her senior class. Asked them to write journals about the thing you don't say out loud. One student wrote, "I've never prayed, but I felt like he was singing the kind of prayer I'd understand." A pastor from Alabama emailed Mel saying, "I've preached for 25 years. That 3-minute song said more than half my sermons." Bill started getting letters. Some handwritten, some typed, some printed out emails forwarded 3 times. "I listened at midnight, cried in my car." I didn't know anyone else doubted like I do. I play it on the porch. Feels like I'm not alone. He read everyone. Kept them in a shoebox under his desk. Not to gloat. Not to frame. Just to remember. That something small, sung honestly, could still matter. Chelsea finally asked him the question he hadn't asked himself yet. Dad, are you going to sing it again? He looked at her. Paused. Only if they really want to hear it. She smiled. They already do. By the end of that month, a dozen small gatherings had sprung up across Arkansas, whispers, as people had begun calling them. Not concerts. Not services. Just circles of folks in church basements, backyards, and rec rooms, who played hollow light, then talked. About the doubt they hid, the faith they faked, the weight they carried, and for once, they felt safe speaking it out loud. The church basement in North Little Rock smelled faintly of coffee, folding chairs, and old hymnals. Fluorescent lights hummed above, casting a soft, familiar glow on the mismatched circle of people gathered below. About 30 of them, teachers, truckers, nurses, retirees. No stage. No microphones. Just a Bluetooth speaker, a pot of decaf, and a song queued on someone's phone. This was the third whisper night that week. It hadn't been planned that way. No one was organizing tours or selling tickets. The gatherings were spreading the only way real things do. Person to person, heart to heart. Someone would hear Hollow Light, share it with a friend, and that friend would gather a few more people and say, "Just come sit. We'll listen." Bill Clinton hadn't been invited to this one. He didn't need to be. He wasn't the point anymore. But that night, he came anyway. Unannounced. Quiet. A baseball cap pulled low, a denim jacket zipped high. He'd heard from Sarah, his former scheduler, about the gathering. She told him, "You should come, just to see what's happening." And something in her voice made it impossible to say no. When he arrived, they didn't recognize him at first. Not in this light. Not in this setting. But then someone gasped softly. And then no one moved. Bill nodded, gave that small, almost sheepish smile. "I didn't come to speak," he said, voice low. "Just to listen." And they let him. The group took their seats again. Someone hit play. The guitar chords rang out through the phone's small speaker, tinny, but still powerful. The room leaned in. He listened to his own voice like it belonged to someone else. When the final line faded. Not loud, not clear, but somehow they're true. The room didn't applaud. They didn't cry. They just breathed together, like the song had pressed on something old and tender in each of them. Then came the stories. A woman in her 60s, Mary, spoke first. Her husband had passed 3 years ago. She still wore his wedding ring. "I stopped praying after he died," she said. "Didn't know how to anymore." But that line, about faith not being loud, that stuck with me. I don't know if I believe again, but I started whispering. A young man followed, Troy, maybe 25. Ball cap, tattoos, biting a thumbnail nervously. "I got clean 9 months ago," he said. "Been through hell. Been in rooms like this before, mostly court-mandated." Laughter broke gently. But this. "I came because someone said the song felt honest." And it did. I needed honest. Then an older black man named Reggie, retired military, voice gravel deep, spoke up. We're all used to men like Clinton talking big, but he sang small. That matters. People nodded. Some wiped eyes. Others just leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped, like they were holding onto something invisible and fragile. Bill sat silently, took it all in. When it came time for him to speak, he hesitated. "I don't have any new words," he said, "but I've got ears. And a heart. That's what I brought tonight." He paused. "When I wrote that song, I didn't think anyone else would hear it. I was sitting in a dark room, asking questions I didn't want anyone to know I had. But you've made me believe that maybe questions are the real beginning of faith, not the end. There it was again, that hush, the collective stillness that wasn't silence, but reverence. A whole room holding its breath, not from tension, but from truth. Afterward, a young woman approached him. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He nodded. "Do you regret waiting this long to share it?" Clinton looked down at his hands. The same hands that had signed bills, shaken thousands of palms, waved across podiums. But this question, it was different. He looked up. "Yes," he said, "but I think I would have written a different song if I'd done it earlier. It took some scars to make it honest." She smiled, eyes brimming. It was honest. That night, he didn't go home right away. He drove around Little Rock, through neighborhoods he hadn't visited in years. Some changed, some not. But the song, his song, played in his mind, not as a melody anymore, but as a mirror. It wasn't just a confession anymore. It had become a conversation. And the crowd, the one he'd always thought he needed to lead, had become his teachers. The echo of the song was no longer his alone. It started with a phone call. Not from a reporter, not from a politician, from a stranger. Her voice was clear, steady, the kind that carried truth without needing to shout. "My name is Anna," she said. "I don't expect you to know who I am, but I heard your song, and I think I needed to speak with you." Bill Clinton was sitting on his back porch when he took the call. Arkansas spring air all around him. The light was soft. The trees were alive. And he was still trying to figure out what to do with the way hollow light had begun to take on a life beyond him. He leaned forward. "You've got me listening," he said. Anna was 33. A single mother, social worker, former seminary student, and, as she put it, a person who used to believe with all her heart and then lost the map. She'd heard Hollow Light at a community gathering in Oklahoma. Someone had brought a speaker. The song had been passed around on a flash drive like it was contraband. By the time the second chorus hit, Anna was crying. "I don't know how to explain it," she told him, "but it felt like someone finally said the part I'd been afraid to speak." She paused. "I'm not calling for a favor or praise. I just wanted to say thank you for singing something real." They ended up talking for 45 minutes. About silence, about burnout, about how faith sometimes shrinks until it's no louder than breath, and how being honest about that feels like betrayal in most places. Clinton listened, didn't offer advice, didn't speak like a former president. He just responded, as a man who knew what it meant to have believed deeply, and then watched certainty slip through your hands like water. Before hanging up, Anna said something he wouldn't forget. "There's so much noise out there. Everyone performing, shouting, preaching. But your whisper, that made room for me." He didn't sleep well that night. Not from regret, from reflection, that a simple, wounded melody could make space in a stranger's life. More space than all his speeches ever had. The next morning, he called Mel. "I need your help," he said. Within 2 weeks, they'd organized something new. No press, no live stream, no donors, just a gathering. They called it the Listening Room. A small-town community center in Fayetteville opened its doors. They set out 50 chairs. No banners, no slogans, just a sign at the door. Stories, not sermons. Questions welcome. Bill didn't sing that night. Instead, he sat quietly in a corner chair. A teacher stood and told of the days she walked into her classroom, smiling while her faith lay shattered at home. A man in his 50s shared how he hadn't prayed since the day his brother died in Iraq, but that Hollow Light had reminded him how to grieve. A teenager, awkward, nervous, spoke through tears about not feeling welcome in church because of who he loved, and how hearing the song made him believe God might still be listening. People clapped, wept, hugged, sat in silence. Clinton finally spoke, near the end. Softly, "Y'all gave me something tonight I didn't know I still needed. A reminder that faith isn't something we hold up for others to see. It's something we carry together when it gets too heavy alone." From there, the listening room grew. Not in spectacle, but in honesty. Little pop-up groups formed in cafes, libraries, parks. Someone would bring a speaker, play the song, then ask one question. What line felt like it was about you? And then the conversations began. A woman in Monroe said it reminded her of being 13 and asking her mom if God still loved her after her parents' divorce. A man in Memphis said it helped him understand his wife's depression for the first time in 10 years of marriage. And still, Bill didn't step into the spotlight. He refused interviews, declined invitations to share the story on national TV. "This wasn't made for headlines," he told Mel. "It was made for eye contact." He showed up to the gatherings quietly. Sometimes he just sat in the back. Sometimes he brought coffee. Always he listened. Then came the night in Nashville. The crowd was bigger than usual, nearly 100 people. The song played, and after the silence that followed, a man stood, well-dressed, maybe mid-40s. He took a long breath before speaking. "I used to write speeches for you," he said, looking directly at Clinton. "Back in '96. I helped put words in your mouth that I didn't always believe. But I listened to Hollow Light last week, and I finally understood that maybe you didn't always believe them either." The room froze. Bill looked up. He smiled. "You're right," he said. "Sometimes I believed them because I needed to. Other times, I was just trying to believe them while saying them out loud." The man nodded. His eyes welled. "That's the most honest thing I've ever heard you say." "That's because I finally learned," Bill said. "That honesty doesn't belong in speeches. It belongs in the pauses." The room was still, and once again, the crowd fell silent. Not because they didn't have anything to say, but because the moment had already said enough. The whispers didn't stop. Months after the first backyard song, Hollow Light had become more than a moment. It had become a movement. Not political, not organized, but deeply human. Church basements, coffee shops, living rooms across the South and beyond began hosting listening nights. No fanfare, no agendas, just people gathering to hear the song and share what it stirred in them. And still, Bill Clinton never promoted it. He didn't post. He didn't perform. He just showed up. Sometimes, he'd be the quietest man in the room. Sometimes, he'd stay until every chair was stacked. And other times, he'd slip out early, unnoticed, smiling faintly as voices rose behind him. What he'd once feared would be too personal had become his most impactful public offering. In early spring, Mel visited him at home. She brought with her a box filled with letters, dozens of them, stories from strangers. "You don't know me, but your song helped me speak to my son again. I played it for my sister the night before her surgery. She asked me to play it again when she woke up. It reminded me I'm not broken because I have doubts. I'm just human." Clinton read each one slowly, carefully, like scripture, folded them gently, kept them in a drawer he labeled "The Real Presidency." One afternoon, sitting on the porch with Chelsea, he said, "I spent years giving speeches that I hoped would make history, but this song, it made honesty." Chelsea looked at him, eyes soft, and honesty lasts longer than applause. He nodded. They sat in silence, just listening to the wind through the trees. He never recorded another song, never needed to. Hollow Light had said what it came to say. It had done what it came to do. He didn't need to be remembered as the man who led a nation. He was content to be remembered as the man who once, just once, sang the truth in a backyard and let it echo. When he passed years later, there was no national tribute concert, no grand eulogy about hollow light. That wasn't the song's nature. But at candlelit vigils in Arkansas, Nashville, Jackson, and beyond, people gathered. They played the song on phones and old speakers. And when the final note faded, there was always silence. The same silence that had followed the very first time. Not empty, not mournful, just sacred. A pause full of reverence for the man who whispered something real into the world. And in doing so, helped the rest of us believe we could too. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe and press the like button.